Hello BookTube. I'm talking about a travel book today. This one is called Destination Cambodia by Walter Mason, and the subtitle is Adventures in the Kingdom. Now, I suspect that there are probably a million travel books written about Cambodia, just like I think there's probably a million travel books written about every country, right? Travel books are a very popular genre. But Cambodia is a bit of a unique situation in that the past 25 years, it's been changing very rapidly. At the beginning of this century, the capital city Phnom Penh was not modernized and didn't have a lot of foreigners in it. But since then, there's been a huge influx of foreigners and a huge influx of money and a huge influx of modernization. And as a result, the city and perhaps the culture has been changing a lot, to the point where the travel books that are written about Cambodia in the late 90s or the early 2000s were already out of date. And I suspect that the country has been changing a lot since then. I lived in Cambodia from 2011 to 2015. I left in 2015. I was back a couple times to visit, but I haven't been back since 2018. I understand it's changed a lot since then because of the COVID shutdown and the resulting effect on tourism and the economy, and well, all kinds of things. I'm not going to get into it here. But point being, the country is in a very fluid state. It's changing a lot. It's modernizing a lot. It's being affected by globalization at a much more rapid pace than other countries, in large part because it came to the global community late and had to make a lot of very quick changes. So any travel book on Cambodia is probably going to get dated very quickly. This travel book came out during the years I was living in Cambodia. It came out in 2013. It looks like it was written during 2012, which is when the author was traveling around in Cambodia. I don't think it's currently being sold in bookstores anymore, although you can still get used copies off of Amazon. The author is, I believe, Australian. I bought a copy of the book in Monument Bookstore in Phnom Penh in Cambodia. I'm not sure if this book was got wide circulation in the United States, but it was readily available in Cambodia at least, and possibly Australia, the author's home country. The author has, looks like, been living and traveling in Southeast Asia for years. It seems like he's more comfortable in Vietnam, and his first book is called, I believe, Destination Saigon, and this is his follow-up book, Destination Cambodia. But he's coming from the experience of having traveled a lot first in Vietnam, and a lot of his points of reference are from Vietnam. So anyways, I'm sure that this book is probably dated now, but when I first read it, when I read it in 2013, it seemed very new and fresh to me. So a lot of the previous travelogue books, or at least the ones that were famous, were from the lawless days of the 1990s. But this book, Destination Cambodia, was presenting a version of Cambodia that I was more familiar with from my days there from 2011 to 2015. So things like the Angry Birds, how popular Angry Birds were in Cambodia during that period, appearing on t-shirts and signs all over. Facebook had taken Cambodia by storm during that time. The constant addiction to cell phones, the K-pop music, the Phnom Penh yuppies. All of these are mentioned in this book. All of these were very prominent during the years I was living in Cambodia. So it was interesting for me to read it. And perhaps, as you might already be thinking, this book is a little bit of a niche taste. It will be of interest maybe to people who were familiar with Cambodia during this period, or I guess maybe interested in recent Cambodian history, if that doesn't apply to you, this book probably won't be interesting. But yes, let's get into the review. So Walter Mason is a talented writer, and the book is very readable. I finished this book off in only a few days, and I usually am a slow reader, and it takes me like a couple months to finish a book. But this one I found was very readable. It had an easygoing style that flows effortlessly from page to page, and is a very pleasant book to idle away an afternoon with over a cup of coffee. There's also a lot of humor in this book. Walter Mason reminds me a little bit of Bill Bryson. Not quite as good as Bill Bryson, but the same general idea. He mixes a lot of humor with his travel stories. Another positive point for this book is that Walter Mason does a very good job of getting out of the expatriate bubble. So there's so many foreigners in Phnom Penh that it's very easy to spend your time in Phnom Penh and have very little interaction with actual Cambodians outside of the service staff at restaurants or something. Walter Mason, however, has a lot of Cambodian friends, and he travels all over with his Cambodian friends and gets lots of information from them about Cambodia. So he's not learning about Cambodia from the expats. He's learning about it from his Cambodian friends. Now, it doesn't sound like he ever learned the Cambodian language, but he has a lot of English-speaking Cambodian friends, and he details his adventures hanging out with them. It sounds like he's made a lot of these connections from his years living in Vietnam. And as a consequence, he's able to get off the beaten track and go places a lot of tourists don't go, and have experiences a lot of tourists don't experience. His Cambodian friends take him to provincial towns and even hillside villages in the jungle. Walter Mason also spends a lot of time hanging out in the monasteries with the monks. And there are some not so subtle hints in this book that part of the attraction he feels for the young men in the monasteries is physical in nature. But he's also interested in Buddhism and the local Cambodian religious practices. Much of the book is spent describing monastic life in Cambodia. So, through Walter Mason's writing, the reader gets some insights into areas of Cambodian society that most expats never get access to. The book doesn't have an overarching narrative, but is mostly a collection of different anecdotes, each one its own small chapter, without any transition between stories. I'm not even sure the stories are in chronological order, such as the fragmented nature of the book. One chapter will be in the countryside, the next chapter will be in Phnom Penh, and the next chapter is likely to be in Angkor Wat. For those of us with short attention spans, the fact that the book is broken down into a series of bite-sized, easily digestible short anecdotes makes it all the more appealing. However, because the book is composed almost entirely of different snapshots of life in Cambodia, there is a bit of a danger of losing the forest for the trees problem. So, through these little snapshots, we get hints of what life is like in Cambodia, but we never get any big descriptions of all of the things that usually strike an outside observer entering Cambodia for the first time. I mean, when I got off the plane in my first week in Cambodia, I was just shocked. And you know, every country there's culture shock, every new country, but Cambodia was just on a different level to me. And you know, I mean, maybe it was because I had never been to a third world country before, but the contrast between how the middle class or the upper middle class was living and how the poor were living side by side right there in Cambodia, or all the very luxurious Western restaurants or bars or clubs where there were all these beggars around outside of it, but then there are all these people in the bar just pretending, just having a good time and partying and pretending that they couldn't see the beggars. The way the people out in the street just looked tired and old before their time, and the sunburned or sun-weathered faces and the lines across their face was striking. But then you would go into an expensive coffee shop and see all the rich Cambodians who had faces that were very smoothed and polished and reminded me of the people I used to know when I was living in Japan. And so that weird disconnect and the idea that there were all these different levels of society in Phnom Penh, I found very striking when I got there. Not to mention the expat community, which again is something that Walter Mason doesn't deal with a lot. But when I was living in Japan, the expat community was mostly English teachers in their 20s who were fresh out of college and were teaching English abroad for a few years before they figured out what they wanted to do with their lives. Phnom Penh had a much more diverse expat community. NGO workers and missionaries, but also a lot of interesting characters, shall we say, who had rather interesting lives and then just kind of ended up in Phnom Penh for one reason or another. So that kind of, I don't know, that was the kind of thing I was expecting to get from a travel book about Cambodia, being like, okay, look, Cambodia is this really weird place. So here, let me explain all the things that you're gonna notice as soon as you get off the plane. Walter Mason doesn't do that at all. He is just giving you a series of little anecdotes about his various interactions with his Cambodian friends. And it wasn't the story I thought I was getting when I picked up the book. But the golden rule of book reviewing is review the book that the author wrote and not the book that you wish he had written. So if you take this book for what it is, not as an all-encompassing description of life in Cambodia, but as some small snapshots of life, then I think it serves its purpose well. Particularly for us, those of us who may have lived in Cambodia for a while, but missed various aspects of Cambodian culture, perhaps because we were stuck in the expat bubble. This book can be interesting in that regard. So, yeah, there were a number of other little anecdotes in the book, some of which reflected on my experience, some of them did not. One thing, at one point, he's describing the hotel where he's staying, and it was right around the corner from where I was living. I mean, just here's my apartment building. Here's a noodle shop, and then here's the hotel where you were staying. So you just go around the noodle shop, and we were, I don't know, he was staying like 30 feet from where I was. So, and it sounded like he was in that area in 2012. So I must have walked past him on the street at some point when he was there doing the research for his book. I'm not sure. So a number of the areas he describes were kind of in my neighborhood in Phnom Penh. And it was interesting for me to read about it. I don't know if it would be interesting for anyone else. Maybe. But if you're interested in Cambodia, it might be an interesting book to pick out. Thank you.